Welcome to episode 36 of the Ikario podcast. In this episode, we talk about how to improve your social life. Perhaps if you're a little bit on the shy side, maybe being social doesn't come entirely naturally to you. There is a concept that's very interesting that Shane introduced to me personally about a year ago that would really help you improve and expand your social circle.
And before we get into that, we answer a voice message that was sent in, and we talk a bit more about topics we've touched on in the last episode about toxic masculinity, about like how to find your way in the world as a man and how to find like that balance between when are you a badass and when are you a softie, and kind of where is the middle ground there. That is in today's episode, and as usual, you can find show notes for the episode by going to ikario.com/036 for episode 36.
Hello and welcome to the Ikario podcast, where we help you break free from the human zoo, optimize your life, and become a force to be reckoned with your hosts once again, Ollie and the man himself. Here he is.
And I'm Shane. Welcome to the show.
Let's
start off. We got a voice message here that I think is a good start.
Excellent. I've not heard it yet, so this is news to me.
Let's do it.
A question regarding toxic masculinity and being vulnerable. So where do you find the balance between saying, hey, okay, you gotta be strong, you gotta be a man, you gotta be ready to be kicked in your ass every now and then, and hey, it's okay to be vulnerable, it's okay to let the people that love you see who you are and how you're feeling and what you're feeling. Where is that balance? I mean, how do you balance those two things?
This was sent in by Tony, so thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Tony.
I think that's a great question.
It's a great question. The thing that came up for me, are those two things different? Are they fundamentally as different as we think they are? Because in my experience, showing up in a vulnerable way requires real courage, and you will get your ass kicked, right? So, I mean, I know where the question's coming from. I get the question, but I'm wondering, are these things really as different as we think?
Yeah, no, I think that is almost paradoxical about it, is that if you're always in like, look at me, I'm the strong macho man mode, then you're avoiding showing up in a vulnerable way. You're actually avoiding the ass kicking in a way, right? So I think you're right about that. I also think that actually the distinction that Tony made here is really clever, because one way to think of it is that if you're, and this is if we make a distinction, right? If we kind of treat it as a black and white thing, you can think of it as, out in the world versus home base, where when you're out in the world doing your thing, making shit happen and so on, then you are in kind of man up, suck it up, do the hard thing mode, right? But then when you come back to your home base, that is where it is appropriate. That's the right place and time to soften up. And this would be a little bit different maybe in terms of, or I think that the mistake is, or it's like really unfortunate if someone is just constantly in this having to demonstrate, constantly have to demonstrate that I'm a big, strong alpha male, thumping my chest and so on. It's like, even when I'm around friends, even in my relationship, even with my family, I just always have to be loudly displaying my masculinity in some way, right? That is costly. I would say it's costly behavior, but I do think, there's a point here where, yes, there are situations where it's like the right approach is to have like this hard approach, forward momentum, make shit happen, smash things to bits, rebuild them, this kind of energy, right? But again, like that would be the appropriate thing, is when you're out in the world on your adventure, building your business, doing whatever it is that you do out in the world, that's when it's most appropriate to be in that mode. And then you should have some kind of a home base to come back to where you can just say, no, look, I'm not going to go super hard and make shit happen right now. Right now, I want to be taken care of, or I just need someone to tell me that everything's okay or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
And that would be like context appropriate, you know?
So that's basically what you're saying, isn't it? Is that it's not like you don't need to get locked into this mode of I need to be this super masculine alpha dude all the time.
Yeah.
Even when I'm sat at home chilling with my wife or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about being more fluid.
Yeah.
So you're able to relax and you feel accepting of the part of you that wants to be taken care of every now and then. You're not repressing that because you think you've got to be this masculine dude.
And this is the meaning of fragile masculinity. And I think a lot of us are taught masculinity in a way that's very fragile, which is to say that you have to uphold certain like behaviors at all times. If you slip up once, that's the end. That's the end of your masculinity, right? And so this is something I came across on Reddit, as I thought was pretty funny, where, you know, someone had like, it was a picture of a sporting event or something where I guess, whatever, something dramatic had happened. And there were two men in the audience who had like, you know, a shocked expression with their hands on their cheeks, kind of. And someone had posted this picture and commented like, oh, you know, men are so feminized nowadays. Look at these men doing these kind of feminine gestures. Okay. This was like their example of the degeneracy of the world. You know, it's like men making the shocked face expression.
That's the example they found.
Yeah.
Was men looking slightly shocked.
Yeah. But that's the thing, right? Is like, imagine someone's sense of masculinity is so fragile that's like, if you touch your face, that's it. You're no longer a man. Game over.
How much of yourself do you have to continuously just deny over the course of a day to maintain that persona? That's so exhausting.
Mm-hmm. And so the acknowledgement, so that's with the fluidity, right? So the acknowledgement to say that, yes, I can be, sometimes I'm that guy, you know, sometimes I'm in the gym and I'm you know, hitting the heavy bag and I'm beating people up and whatnot, you know, and sometimes I'm not that. Sometimes I'm not dominating everything that crosses my path, and I can still be a man, and I can still be like a fully valid human being, and so on, right? And I also think that if you don't do that, then you probably compensate in secret, right? You're probably like a secret alcoholic or something like that, you know.
It's got to come out somehow.
It's got to come out somehow, exactly. So that's one way to look at it, as, you know, two separate things. But like you said, what also came to my mind is that often it's not that distinguished, and that's where I would think of, you know, gentle strength, basically, because you can be, and that's where I also think that the kind of the whole topic of toxic masculinity becomes really important, because even if you're out in the world making shit happen, you're in like masculine energy creation mode, and you're negotiating a deal for your business or something, right? That would be the place to not be in nice guy mode and to not let people walk all over you and so on, right? That makes sense. But even there is like the toxic masculinity way to do it, where you're just constantly thumping the desk and puffing out your chest and just like
there's ridiculous handshakes.
Yeah,
where
you have to do some special handshake.
Look in their eye for exactly this amount of time.
And you have to squeeze harder and all this nonsense, right? It's like, okay, that's the wrong way to do that. And I think that you can, even there, you can be in a mode where you say, look, my job right here is to make sure that I get a good deal. And it's to make sure that I don't let people take advantage of me, and that I stand by my principles and so on. And I understand that maybe the people on the other side of that table and the negotiation are adversarial. They have incentives that make them adversaries to some extent. But you can you can acknowledge that, and you can stand your ground. And to me, that's the essence of being a strong man in that sense, or just being a strong person in that moment, is the essence of knowing what your goal is, standing your ground, standing by your principles, and maybe being like strategically, tactically clever in accomplishing that. And you can do that while being very calm, you know, like you can do that without being loud or aggressive or anything like that. And that to me is also like, that's where it matters. And whether or not you're making yourself vulnerable there is kind of besides the point. It's like, yeah, are you capable? Basically, are you capable of doing your best? And you know, maybe that involves like thumping your chest and doing alpha male stuff, but maybe it doesn't. Doesn't really matter. The outcome is what matters. And what I would say that what I aspire to is to do these things in kind of a gentle strength kind of way. You know, because I don't have to look at this as in a very confrontational way. I don't have to look at the other people in that scenario as like my enemies or anything like that. I can understand you're also just people. You're also just trying to do your best and so on. I can understand all that. I can have full empathy for these people, but I'll still stand my ground, you know? So I kind of look for that kind of balancing act.
Yeah, look for that middle way kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I do also see value in the idea that depending on the context, there's different states of being that, depending on what your goals are more beneficial. Like when I fought in a cage, for example, it wouldn't have made sense for me to be in there saying, you know what, I just want to be loved as I am.
Yeah.
You know what, I'm about to fight some dude.
Yeah.
I was a lunatic. And
Yeah.
it seems that mode of being was perfect for the situation. But if
Totally,
I'd behaved in that way in literally any other context, I'd be locked up and whatnot. So it's context dependent.
Yeah, and that fluidity of behavior, I think that's the real mark of strength here. Like, and that even, you know, regardless of whether we're talking about masculinity or anything else, it's like, to me, that is a pretty interesting power unlock that I'm still working on. Like, I'd love to be better able to do that. It's like this kind of mode switching, you know?
Yeah.
To be able to deliberately switch into what I think is the best mode to be in a situation, instead of, because usually we're just carried away by it, right? We change states or modes of being kind of unconsciously. We kind of get emotionally carried away, and often we regret it afterwards, right? It's like, and you wish you could have been in a different mode. To me, that's like, I suspect that's a super powerful unlock if you can have, the more control you can have over what mode you're in.
Yeah, precisely. I think without going too far down this rabbit hole, there was a simple tip, like a state switching tip. I think I mentioned to you like a year ago, whereas it's like the second self switch, basically. So like the prerequisite for this exercise is that you write down exactly how you would behave in the world, like who you would be if you had there was no impediment. You just were already showing up as the person. And then you get a box of Tic Tacs.
Oh, yeah.
And then whenever you're in a situation where you're like, hang on a minute, it'd be really cool if I could be that person, especially right now. And you just save these Tic Tacs, you label them, whatever, and you just pop one. And you literally, you build up this association that when you pop one of these, it's like the liquid that goes into Bane kind of thing, you know, you press test. It's the same deal. And the more you do this, you build up the association. You don't use the Tic Tac for anything else if you can control it. But like pop one, it's like, shit, okay, I'm this person now. It's one of those things that seems like it won't work, but the way the brain associates with different actions and rituals and stuff and produces different outcomes is really fascinating.
Yeah, that's something I want to explore, this kind of thing, because it's also on one of the community calls, this came up, like even just the idea of like switching costumes, you know, where it could even be something like, I don't know, glasses on, glasses off, or something like that, you know, where you deliberately build an association with things like that, you know. I think that could be really powerful, but it's something I need to explore more myself.
Yeah. And there's one last thing I want to say about the whole masculinity thing. So I was burdened by this question when I was younger. And there was a kind of a role model for a while who really helped me sort of see this in a new way, because I was struggling, because I'm quite an emotionally sensitive person, and no other men really around me was modeling kind of that behavior in a way that was acceptable. It's like, no, you need to repress that, basically. Until I saw an interview with Terry Crews. Terry Crews is fucking jacked, massive, like athletic dude. And but in his movies, he often dances in a really feminine kind of way, and often shows up in some of his roles, like in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, for example, is in quite an effeminate sort of dude, and it's part of the comedy of him. Because to look at him, I think he was an extra in American History X as a convict in the background, and he looked like he'd rip your head off. But yeah, in his roles, he often speaks quite effeminately. And in this interview, he was talking about how he, like, through his own personal journey, he's learned to embrace his feminine aspects, and he saw it as an extremely life-affirming and positive thing for his personality. And his own enjoyment of himself, the way he described it. I enjoy myself, like actually enjoy who I am a lot more when I don't look at these parts of me as something to be gotten rid of or ashamed of. But the fact that I do have this really strong feminine part of me that allows me to play these roles and enjoy them, and it's not a negative thing. And when I saw him do that, because he had all the street cred, you know, he was jacked and stuff, and he was successful and whatnot. So I was like, damn, if a successful guy like that can embrace both sides of him, then I surely can. Yeah. So that kind of really helped me with that.
That's cool. Yeah, that's very, and he is great. Like it makes for such good comedy as well.
It's just fantastic.
The contrast between. Yeah, he just looks so intimidating by default.
And then he just dances in a really sort of like flamboyant way, and you don't expect it.
That's cool.
It's always a riot.
All right. Now, the other thing I want to briefly bring up is like I feel like, you know, I owe an apology because in a recent episode we talked about incels and MGTOW, which also I don't want to conflate them, but you know. Mainly the MGTOW crowd got very mad at us.
The MGTOW and the red pill. It's mainly MGTOW, I think.
Yeah. And so, you know, they got mad at us because of the things we said. And I have to say, you know, I said that they have strong, upset toddler energy. And I feel like I need to apologize to toddlers everywhere. Because if you look at the comments they left, it's like, at least toddlers aren't racist, you know?
Guys, so I'm going to put this clip in the description of this video on YouTube, and also in the show notes. But yeah, I put a clip up of the most recent, as of this moment, podcast episode. We were talking about, MGTOW, men go their own way, red pill, that kind of thing. And then within an hour, there was just comment central. It was like the dislike to like ratio on the clip itself was just astronomically favored towards dislike. And I was like, what's going on here? Yeah. And I thought, did we get it wrong? And then I read some of the most horrifically poorly worded comments, and they're just like severely angry, like people. Yeah. And I thought, oh, who's in the wrong here? And it kind of proves Shane right in a way. Shane basically just went on a clip and called them all a bunch of angry toddlers, and they responded very maturely.
Yeah. But to be fair, look, okay, I am poking the hornet's nest here some more, right? But look, to be fair. So first of all, if you go and look there, some of the worst comments have been removed. So
did we remove them? Because
some of them just disappeared.
They disappeared because I read the notification, and one of them was just extremely racist. Yeah. And I was like, well, that was gone pretty quickly.
That must have been filtered out or something.
Yeah.
But yes, like so. But you can see. But also, to be fair, right? Okay, I'm poking fun, but to be fair, a couple of things I want to say about this are that. There's at least one comment that where clearly someone is like trying to make an attempt at like educating us about this. There are many who are just like, who are basically just proving the point.
We got called blue pill betas.
I know, right? It's like, and you know, the funny thing about that is a lot of these comments, and that's one of the paradoxical things about the internet and like internet bubbles. You know, a lot of these comments are not addressed at us. They're addressed at the other people in that tribe. So it's like you go and leave a comment to be like, hey guys, look, I'm one of you. Look, I told them. And it's this, the blue-pilled beta thing is, I just imagine someone being like, oh, I call these guys on the internet betas. That's an alpha male thing to do, right? Am I an alpha male now?
Do you accept me?
Yeah. So anyway, no. So for the person who called us blue-pilled betas, you're definitely an alpha male. Don't worry about it. But anyway, the thing I wanted to say is that there was at least one comment who tried to explain what was going on, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And also, I think this comment also mentioned like, look, of course, in every community you'll have like crazies, and it's unfair to judge the community by their crazes. And I also agree with that. And so I don't want to, that would be easy to do, right? And this would be the internet thing to do, is like you pick out the dumbest comments and you dunk on them,
Yeah, that's the reaction videos and stuff.
But I don't want to do that, because also I don't want to, kind of judge the entire community by like the most knuckle dragging members they have who came out and left a comment and a dislike, to feel empowered. But I also want to say that one of the problems, and this is not a MGTOW specific problem or anything, this is a general problem, like an epistemic problem we have, is that, of course, the defense, there's various justifications. And one of the ideas, and this is true for pretty much any community, right? They will basically tell you, no, you're wrong. And look, we have all this data, we have all this proof that shows that we are the rational ones. And I think any ideology, no matter how crazy, is built around a bunch of kernels of truth. Right? There's always some kernels of truth somewhere, sometimes buried in the madness somewhere. And I'm aware of that. Like the men's rights movement, they do have, there are kernels of truth there where it's like, yeah, that's true. Like, you can't deny that. And, things like, just as an example, right, almost all of the most dangerous jobs in the world are done by men. And, suicide rates are way higher for men than for women. And in things like, family court, when it comes to divorce and so on, almost everywhere in the world, men are at a disadvantage, stuff like that. This is true.
Yeah.
And it's also true that, and I think that's where a lot of the anger comes from, there's a lot of men are kind of told the opposite, right? We grow up with the story of like, oh, it's women who are always oppressed, women who are always the victims and so on. And if that's the story you're told, and then you are on the victim side of one of these systems that disadvantages men, and obviously that makes you very mad, right? But it's not enough. It's not enough, right? It's not enough to just say, well, there are some things about this that are true, and therefore, accept this ideology. It's the same reason why I generally reject religion, because when you reject religion, it's the same kind of argument that gets made. But it helps people, it gives people comfort and meaning. And what about, here's in this massive book, I found this one thing that, kind of isn't this a good point? So shouldn't you accept the entire thing? No, it's not enough. It's not enough. You have to look at the totality of it. And with something like MGTOW, I think that the totality of it is, it's not something that I want in my life. And I think that it is one, like the cons outweigh the pros ultimately. For the goal of becoming the best human being you can be, I think that going into something that's so much fueled by like bitterness and that has this stance of like, push the thing that hurt me further and further away. That's not how I want to deal with things that are difficult in my life.
One of the comments did address that by saying that in that video, what you and Abby focused on was the bitterness and resentfulness.
Yeah.
And one of these comments addresses that by saying this is what's commonly known as the rage stage. Mm-hmm. Where like when someone first takes the red pill or starts or supposedly is exposed to these new truths about the way women are and the way women in society are and all this other stuff, he will be enraged by it. But the comment basically says that that's a stage, that's like a phase that passes, and eventually it forms this acceptance of the way the world is, and it's no longer bitter or resentful anymore. So what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I can imagine. But then, my first thought goes to the attention economy and that whole machine, where the rage stage is how you get attention, right? The rage stage is there as a lead generation mechanism that get people angry and send them down rabbit holes of stuff that make them more and more angry, right? And so, why do you have a rage stage as like your recruitment tool, And I know that I'm not even accusing the people in the MGTOW community because they didn't create it. The algorithm created it.
I was just about to address that. Yeah. So what you're saying is that it's like you can't. All these MGTOW people that are commenting and shit, just with loads of like angry comments, like you can't be angry at those people, because it's like if you looked back at their entire history, what led them to this point where they're getting angry, you'd see probably a breakup, some issues with women or something, and then you'd see one video that got their full attention for the whole thing. They're saying, "Look, you're not the problem," and it's like shit. And then the algorithm was clocked onto it and was like, this guy loves this video. Here's more videos.
Here's more of this,
and he obviously wants to feel better because he's been hurt. So he feels like, it feels like a sense of empowerment. It's like, Dan, I'm in control of this shit. And it's like, you keep watching it, and next thing you know, the phrase that you used in the clip itself was radicalization pathway. Yeah. And I think that was a pretty cool phrase. So he goes down this radicalization pathway, eventually becomes a MGTOW, renounces women and all this other stuff. And
and that's just what happens. Again, like I'm not mad at anyone for this. That's just one of the things that happens, unfortunately, to lots and lots of people. And another thing is, the question I would have is, okay, if there's like the serene, now you live a better life stage at the other end of it, is the kind of belief of love is not real. Women are incapable of love. She's not your girlfriend. It's just your turn to be used by her. Is that still true? Do you still believe that I'm now enlightened as a MGTOWer on the other side? Because if it is, then I think you're still missing the point.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just, I wonder, man. I do wonder, because do you reach that point and are you really happy? Like, are you really happy? It's like more financial independence. Yeah, cool. I am, I do my own thing all the time. Yeah, you can do all that, sure.
Lots of freedom.
Lots of freedoms. Yeah. Lots of unabashed freedom. You got no wife. You got no kids. You got nothing like bothering you. But then what? So you're 45. What are you gonna do? Because like obviously we talked about the Harvard study you and Abby did in the last episode of like the strongest predictor of longevity and life satisfaction was person's relationships. Yeah. And how much do you have to push away? Yeah.
And and another thing I want to say, right? And I'm also talking about all this. I don't know if any more MGTOWers will see any of this stuff, right? But I also want to talk about this from the context of like an epistemic context of how do you navigate the world? How do you navigate the world's ideologies and so on? I just want to share some of my thoughts on this.
Epistemic meaning what's true.
Yeah, the epistemology being the question of how do we know what we know, or how can we determine if anything is true or what is true. Because that's it, right? It's like we have a disagreement, right? The MGTOW crowd, they say this set of things is true, and I'm here saying, well, maybe not, right? So it's an epistemic conflict, basically. And one thing that I think is actually valuable about this kind of thing is being willing to question the most fundamental things, such as everybody tells you, okay, what you do is you enter into a monogamous relationship, and you have kids, and you buy a house, and this is so ingrained as the thing that you do that most of us just never question it. For most of us, it's a question of when. Like, when are you getting married? Not are you getting, when are you going to have kids? Yeah. How many are you going to have?
It's true, yeah.
And being willing to question that entirely, be like, hold on, maybe my ideal life recipe doesn't include any of that stuff. I think that's cool.
That's the basic ikario principle.
Yeah.
It's like just questioning the prevailing sort of narrative.
Totally, yeah.
So it's like, and that's one thing. So yeah, I am going to publish this clip.
Yeah. Put MGTOW in the title.
So maybe MGTOW in the title. So maybe they come back and we can say. So we are categorically saying that we're not angry at you if you're watching this and you're part of MGTOW and you're like, yeah. And we're also not blaming you. It's like what we're seeing here is like a result of essentially the algorithm, which is something that we determine is part of the human zoo and a real source of the problem, of many of the problems that we face, both with our attention and this issue we keep seeing with like sort of conspiracy theories and stuff.
Yeah.
So
anyway, and I appreciate people who actually, whatever it is you do, if you argue back or if you poke fun back, I think that's all good,
Bring it on. Honestly, yeah. Let's do that.
Anyway, with that, let's get into what do we want to talk about?
Oh man, so this has gone on. Let's have a look. This has gone on for 28 minutes, 15 seconds. Jeez. So the topic of today's discussion is essentially making friends as an adult. So this came about when you talked about something a little while ago. I think it was about a year ago actually. You spoke about this, about the concept of, because I was asking you, I think, in a conversation about your friendships, like your social circles and stuff. Like as a digital nomad and stuff, how do you maintain like friendships and social circles and whatnot? And you mentioned this idea of sort of social engineering, I think you called it.
Yeah.
And that's like that idea kind of got me interested, because the example you used was like, for example, you running an entrepreneurial workshop, and then you just have a bunch of people there straight away that you meet. Like you meet more people in one evening than you would, say, like in a month without doing that.
Yeah.
So I wanted to address this, and I wanted to address it and talk about this from the perspective, and maybe help some people who maybe are not socially just gifted, not socially natural, because I'm certainly not. And
yeah, neither am I. I'm like totally not. So the reason I got interested in all this is because I'm so unsocial naturally.
Right.
And it is something that I had to develop deliberately. I have to make a deliberate effort. But what I realized, and I think this is where social engineering, which sounds almost a bit sinister.
It does a bit, doesn't it? It's like from a cultural perspective.
Yeah.
It seems a bit like like
Yeah.
1984 or something.
Yeah. It sounds sinister, but I'll give some examples to show what I mean. But I think what's interesting about it is that most of us, or it seems to me that most of us kind of stumble into most of our relationships. So it's like the friends you have are just the people you happen to work with. And even with romantic relationships, most of us like just stumble into these situations, so we have very little control over it. And well, as we've talked about before, I think it's really important that you surround yourself with the right kind of people, right? It's a huge drain on your life if you are in like in toxic or generally just not constructive type of relationships, right? With whether it's family, friends, etc. And so social engineering is the idea that, hey, you can actually take charge here. And I would say that, or at least the way I've experienced it, the main thing for me that is kind of the hack here is you can almost think it like you want to create like a magnetic pull towards you. So you're not like going out trying to introduce yourself. Oh, can I join this group? Can I,
Yeah.
It's like you're making people come to you. And let me tell you the best story of social engineering I've ever heard. Unfortunately, I didn't do this. I'm not nearly that cool, right? But I met this guy. So I was in Thailand years ago and just hanging out and met this guy, who was also an entrepreneur. And somehow we struck up a conversation with this guy, and he ended up telling us this story of when he was in, I think it might have been Bulgaria or somewhere in Eastern Europe, where he and a friend were there, and they were in this town, and they noticed that every evening, or I don't know if it was every evening or only the weekends, but never mind. Let's just say every evening, mostly the young people would come out to the town square, and there was this guy with a cart who was selling like sunflower seeds or something like that. And everyone would buy like these little baggies of sunflower seeds and then sit around and eat sunflower seeds and chat and whatnot, people watch, So they saw this is happening here. And so what they did is the next day they went there early and intercepted the guy with the cart and were like, listen, we're going to buy out your whole cart and you just hand these things out for free today. And if someone asks you, just point to us and says, yeah, these guys, it's on them, right? And if you think about it, I mean, it's like sunflower seeds. It probably didn't even cost them that much, right? This is not like a rich person move. It's really
It's not
simple.
a baller move, is it?
Yeah, it's really simple. And so they didn't just sat there, and everybody who came up to the cart was like, what's going on? And got pointed towards them. Everybody was delighted. And they were also, the new foreigners in town and whatnot. And basically, they just made friends with everyone, right? Because everyone came up to them to say thank you and introduce themselves and ask, oh, what do you do? Where are you from? And so on. And they got invited back to everyone's house to have dinner and, meet the family and all this kind of stuff, right?
They were at a wedding that day.
Yeah, pretty much. They were invited to a bunch of weddings probably. So, and I just thought, wow, imagine how much effort it would take because again, if you think of it as magnet, right? It's like you're the magnet, people come to you. If you don't have that effect, and you have to go out and somehow strike up a conversation with all these people, how long does it take before you make that many friends, right? How much effort does that take?
Honestly.
So that's the best example of this I know. It's just so brilliant, right? and so, yeah, the kind of thing, so that's the kind of thing I've always tried to construct in order to, build my social circle, is basically the two things. You can kind of combine two things, right? You can go to meetups of any kind that are about things that you're interested in. and you can go to, meetup.com or whatever. There's lots of ways to find these, where you'll find people meeting up for doing, whatever, acro yoga in the park, or meditation on Saturday morning, or, entrepreneurs lunch, or whatever. You can do topic plus thing, you'll find it, right?
Meetup.org is really good for
or
that.
.org, is it? Yeah. Yeah, so you can find such meetups, and it's very useful to go to something like that, because you're automatically meeting people who are into the same kind of stuff as you. Because obviously, if you go to the morning meditation in the park, it's a different crowd than the entrepreneurs meetup at Saturday evening at the bar, right?
Yeah.
So you can choose your crowd, and that's really powerful. But what's even more powerful is if you are the organizer of the thing. Now, usually you have to do you have to get the ball rolling a little bit. Depends on how you do it, but because, if you have a couple of friends where you can say, hey, on Saturday we go to the park to meditate, and, a couple of people already say yes to it, and you post it somewhere and they invite their friends and so on, before you know, it's like a dozen people there, right?
Yeah.
And if you're the person who organized the thing, then you have that magnet effect.
Yes.
And so this is something you can do. And one of the things I've done there is I also very much believe in just like leaning into your strengths, right? So what do I like to teach? So I like to basically run workshops, and that you go to a co-working space and you're just like, listen, I can give a presentation on whatever, how we did a product launch, whatever, something that the people in the co-working space are interested in, right? And so I did that in Bali, for example. I just went to every co-working space, was like, hey, do you want me to speak here? And then some of them say yes. And that gives you that exposure. You give the workshop, and you'll just immediately have loads of people come up to you and be like, oh, I'm hosting this dinner, or won't you come along, and so on, right? And it's just like you go from 0 to too many people to stay in touch with in no time at all doing this. So that's basically how I've thought about it, is that I try to put myself in this position where people come to me. And I found it surprisingly easy, to be honest.
Yeah. So it's reversing it's reversing it. So when say if a person's socially, a little socially awkward or anxious, I often find, because in my own coaching practice, I work with guys who are mostly, pretty socially anxious, by their own admission, shy, socially awkward. And the way they frame the whole thing of the social life is, I want something and I'm not getting it. If only I had the thing, people's approval, if only I had a friend, etc. And it's like a taking kind of vibe, right? And what you're describing is you're reversing it. So it's like, rather than being the value taker, you're providing value, right? So the sunflower seed example as well. These guys just found a way to provide mass value to a shed load of people in the course of an afternoon. And you also did the same thing. You provide value. So it's like what I'm trying to do is take the facets of why that works and see exactly how. So obviously familiarity and similarity. So you gave that talk in the right context.
Yeah.
So that people, the right people got the right amount of value from it. So value is really important. But I'm also wondering how much status or perceived status is important there as well.
I think I think that's probably one of the reasons why you have like this magnetic effect, right? It's like you're put in a context where you're kind of the leader in that context in a way. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like in that context, you deliver a presentation as to how you did a product launch. You have some authority because of your experiences and your success entrepreneurially, and straight away you've elevated yourself in a status kind of way. You got some struggling entrepreneurs. This person's a successful entrepreneur. It's like, holy shit, I could learn a lot from that person. I have a reason to interact with that person, and I want to.
Yeah. But it can also be on a much, in a way, like, yes, of course, if I talk to entrepreneurs who are only starting out and they see me as someone who's already made it, so to speak, then of course that puts me in a position of authority. But it could also be the same in a much simpler way. Yeah, if you just say, look, we're going to do a meditation meetup, and I'm just the guy who organizes it, and maybe all I do is I tell people come here at this time, and then I put on, a guided meditation, and that's it. But still, I'm the person who organized it. It's going to be much easier for me to interact with people, or basically I'll have people come to me much more so than if you join someone else's meditation meetup. Then you have to be proactive again in connecting with the people there, right? So even without, like, you don't need like massive authority or status. Just being the organizer gives you that. And the other thing is, I think that also it has this great filtering effect, because for me, if I think of examples, what could I do, right? Obviously, I can give a workshop to entrepreneurs. Something like acro yoga in the park, or just even I could bring some people together and be like, I'm going to teach you some self-defense stuff, or who wants to learn a bit of like basic medieval sword fighting, It's like, maybe you're listening to the thing, wow, that's super lame, Shane. I can't believe that you want to do such lame things. But that's exactly the point. Is like, it attracts a certain kind of person. It attracts people who are, who shows up for let's do medieval sword fighting in the park. It's like a certain kind of weirdo that happens to be the same kind of weirdo I am,
Yeah, and those are the people that you want to knock around with.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like you wouldn't go to a bar on a Saturday night and be like, so guys, it's nice to meet you. I do medieval sword fighting. Who's interested?
Yeah. And this is, I think this is also actually a good point, because for me, like the default socializing things that we have in our culture really don't work for me. I hate bars and clubs and cocktail parties.
You have tried this too,
and
right?
I have tried it.
So
yes.
you're not just saying it from a distance.
No, I have tried this, and I kind of forced myself to learn. It was one of those things, like I wanted to prove to myself that I can do it. Yes, I can go to a bar and I can go up to the girl and say, hey, strike up a conversation. God damn it. And I can even, if I do it often enough, I can get a few numbers and stuff, I forced myself to do that. And then I was like, okay, I can do it. Can I never do this again, please?
Look, I can do it. Just I've proven it, so I can never do it again. Yeah, so you did that. Well, I'm trying to think of an example, because there's an example that I told you at one point, when I think it was like 6 years ago or something. So I used to be a hippie, right? I used to be like a full-blown harem pant wearing, like beads, just soft-spoken kind of hippie, right? It was inauthentic as shit at the time, but it was like it was fun, and I'd plan parties quite often, and I had this big social group, and the social group, like this group of people, I didn't fully realize it at the time. It felt amazing, not entirely sure why, but looking back on it now, I was sort of like elevated in a way.
You were the guru of the group.
I was the guru of the group.
Yeah.
And I remember this, like I used to run meditation gatherings in like an old abandoned factory. Right.
That sounds kind of cool.
Fucking cool.
Yeah.
It's a massive factory, old abandoned steel factory, right? In the middle of the woods.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to arrive there like half an hour early. I'd burn shitloads of incense. I'd make like frothy green tea, and I'd just sit with a fire just on my own. And people would, like, from quite a far distance away, would hear about these and want to come to them.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah. So they'd arrive, and then there'd be like loads of people all sat around, just waiting for like a teaching. Like it was joked of at one point that if I wanted to form a cult, I totally could. Mm-hmm. So I was like, I would read like a Zen story, and then just like sit in the silence for a bit, and everyone would just sort of sit and just wait. And then I'd lead these guided meditations and stuff, and it was really fun, right? But I'd also run parties too, and at that time was like probably my most social. That was probably like the most social year of my entire life. I was just meeting people all the time. It was like word of mouth almost. It's like there's a guy that runs these meditations. It's in a factory. It's dead strange. You want to come to it?
That's so cool.
So it's immediately intriguing, isn't it? You'd want to go to it just to see an abandoned factory. What the fuck?
Yeah, I would totally go to that.
Yeah. And I used Facebook events. I hate plugging Facebook, man. I really hate plugging fucking Facebook. But like I used Facebook events and leveraged those to my advantage too. Like occasionally just run a Facebook event. But the point is that it was like I've even to this day I'm trying to deconstruct exactly how that worked really well. Mm-hmm. But you can tell how there's like an elevation aspect where rather than you being the one that's trying to take value, you're one who's kind of like providing value and being socially proactive instead of reactive, right?
Yeah.
So approaching it from like a socially reactive sort of way would be, what parties are going on? Can I join that party and then meet these people and stuff. It's like, you're expecting that things will just happen for you, rather than being the person who is the active tribe builder.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, a really simple example of this also is, we made a video about this, right? The environment optimization thing, which we can also link to. But, one of the things is like, buy a projector instead of a TV, and you can do movie nights. Right? That's something that we've been doing here as well. It's like a projector doesn't cost more than a TV. It's, they come at all price ranges, just like TVs. But basically, I think that you can for relatively cheap, you can get a projector that can give you an experience that is much more like, that's special.
Yeah.
Much more so than if you have a TV at home. And if you're the person who has the projector, and you just say, well, we do movie nights here, then people are going to come to that. If you're saying, come watch a movie on my TV, that's not that interesting.
In exactly the same way that saying, come meditate with me in this leisure centre function room, it's like,
exactly,
it's boring.
It's
just a meditation class. They're everywhere.
So you add like a little spice, right? You add a little spice to it.
Yeah, and you say it's in an old abandoned steel factory. Mm-hmm. You have to basically go around the back. Don't let anyone see you enter the building because security might see.
Nice.
Come through and be quiet.
Yeah.
And when you arrive, don't make much noise.
That's excellent. That's excellent.
It's perfect, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think of as well ways in which a person who I'm trying to think of the people that I help in my own like private coaching. People who may not see many people, people who maybe don't have many friends, they feel very socially anxious. It's like what practical, because we always like to make things practical. So trying to extract the practical sort of takeaways from this, and it's a really big topic.
I mean, I think that, well, first of all, this is the one problem here is this is a bit of a post-COVID thing, right? And it's like different parts of the world are slowly coming out of the COVID situation, but it's still, this might be something that you have to wait for a while before you can do this again. But what I would suggest is that you think about, like, if this is something you want to do, and if you're generally a socially awkward person and you've struggled with this kind of thing, what I would recommend is that you think about, what can I cultivate that is, something that's interesting to me and so on, that I could share with other people in some context, right? Because it doesn't have to be, some of these things take a lot, right? Before you can, give a presentation to entrepreneurs, you probably have to build a business. Before you can teach people martial arts, you have to learn martial arts, right? Stuff like that. It's like that's a longer term project. But there's almost certainly some things that you're just interested in that you could cultivate and turn into some kind of an event, Another thing, by the way, that also, again, a lot of listeners would probably be like, oh, super lame. But, a book club, like organize a book club. For me, books are like one of the most important things in my life. And it doesn't take any special knowledge. You just say, hey, let's all read this book and then talk about it.
Yeah.
But still, by being the person who organizes it, you're putting yourself in an elevated position. So I would basically consider, what can you cultivate? Especially if you're still in lockdown, while you're in lockdown, before you can actually get to gatherings and things again. What can you cultivate that you could share in such a way? How can you add like the abandoned steel factory effect to it? How can you make it a little more intriguing? And then also you can start by going to other events, right? Go to other meetups that are already happening. You can get the ball rolling a little bit. You can also see how other people do it. And like I said, if you have like one or two contacts, that can get the ball rolling for whatever you organize, right? Because then you're in a situation where you say, okay, I'm organizing this thing. You two are coming. Tell your friends. Plus, you post it on Meetup. That's it.
Cool.
Yeah.
And that's like basic. That's basic social engineering, right? Because there is another topic altogether that deserves its own episode, which is how you just become a generally more social person, right? So this is, I wanted to make the topics distinct. This is social engineering. This is like reversing the magnetic force, really.
Yeah.
But there is certain aspects of it where I'd say to a client, for example, who just doesn't speak to anyone, it's like, just go out and speak to people, even if it's in those little micro interactions.
Yeah. Yeah, if it's like a separate problem of if you like freeze up when you're trying to talk to someone, or you just feel, like you say, that's a totally separate topic. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. And for me, it was like that. For me, that wasn't the specific problem. It's like I just didn't have any friends, basically. But it's not like that I was unable to speak to people or something like that. So I mainly had to find a way to actually bring people in to my social circle, or join other people's social circles. Yeah.
Got you. So you never had actually the issue with interacting. It was more just.
I don't know about never, but by the time I came out of my shell, kind of, it's like I spent a few years kind of just in kind of, in my cave, not interacting with the world other than through the internet. But I also spent a lot of time on self-development during that time. Like by the time I came out of that, I had the confidence to talk to people already.
Yeah. And you'd already worked out, I'm guessing, a little bit more about what really interested you.
Yeah.
Because that's one thing I do notice, mostly in younger guys who are still sort of working out their interests and and what makes them feel passionate and stuff, is that they'll not really have many passions. They won't really have any interest they've explored. They just have this deep sense of inadequacy, and it's like, I just want to be normal and do what everyone else is doing. So that what they'll think is, I need to just go to bars and like,
right,
and be this social person. But they actually don't have any interests, or they don't really have a strong sense of self in the sense of what they love, what they hate, what they believe, what they stand for, all the principles, that kind of thing. And I'm like, it's hard, because they'll end up just trying to be approved of by the crowd, basically, and that kind of can make people quite socially awkward and can fuel the anxiety. So I often suggest, in the same sense that you earlier suggested, find things that you're interested in, develop those skills even, and in such a way that you can then find the others.
Exactly, yeah. And I think it's fine for that to take some time, right? It can take time. It just, if you feel like I don't know what my interests are, or I'm not passionate about anything, like just do more stuff, just try more stuff. Because it clearly is not going to work if you kind of expect to find your passion first and then you start doing it. Yeah. That's clearly not going to happen. So you just got to do some stuff that you're not sure about and see, until you hit something where you go, oh, this is cool.
Yeah. And oftentimes, in order for us to become passionate about something, we there's like a threshold level of skill we need to reach.
Yeah.
It's like when I first started training in the gym, it sucked, but I just wanted to be ripped so much. I just hated the gym. But eventually, like over the years, I just got better at lifting, and I felt an intrinsic sense of satisfaction in lifting weights and stuff.
Right.
And now it's like, that's just something I do because I enjoy it. But initially, if you'd asked me, do I have a passion for this? I'm like, no, I don't. This is horrible. Why does anyone do this?
Yeah. Yeah. And also, if someone feels like, oh, I don't know what to do with myself and I wish I could just be normal. It's like, no, don't be normal, dude. Don't be normal. Normal is terrible, man. Have you seen Normal?
Normal's atrocious.
No, it's terrible. Don't be normal. It's like, but this is also difficult it can be difficult and disorienting at the beginning. I think this is especially for younger people. It's like, I think that ideally you become more like you rather than more like other people. But this is an important distinction that needs to be made. It's like you can be more like you and be socially calibrated, because there is a problem of, like, some people are very poorly socially calibrated, and that can then causes like interpersonal problems, right? Where you make things awkward or you make people feel uncomfortable or something like that, right? But that's a question of social calibration, where you can be your totally weird, idiosyncratic self very authentically, and you can be socially calibrated. And I think it's important to understand the distinction between those two things, because we feel that the mistake that we make is we feel that when we have an awkward or difficult social interaction or something, we feel that people are rejecting us, right? I feel like you're rejecting me, who I am, and I have to now change who I am in order to be accepted. But no. It's more like lost in translation. And you can be, and in fact, people who are very comfortable with the way they are can be very weird and get away with it generally.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important distinction. It's like that people tend to then overcorrect, right, and then try to fit in too hard. But that's actually not what caused the problem to begin with, because you can conform and still be poorly socially calibrated, and now you're just kind of double fucked.
Yeah. Just the final thing I kind of want to end on, unless you have anything else, is there's just this amazing Carl Jung quote. Find me a sane man and I'll cure him for you.
Nice. Yeah.
And Alfred Adler, another psychologist, what is it? Some people never go crazy. What truly dull lives they must lead, right? So it's the idea that, don't be normal, man. Don't be normal and sane.
Yeah.
Be weird. Because if you really were embracing your humanity, like, and who you really are, you're probably pretty fucking weird.
Yeah, and that's a good thing.
Yeah. Agreed.
All
right. So we have a ridiculous question. I've got a ridiculous question to ask you, Shane.
Okay.
For those that don't know, we do this now.
That wasn't much of an explanation. we do this now.
We now ask ridiculous questions. Shane, if you were arrested with no explanation, what would your friends and family assume you had done?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, isn't it? I can imagine that. So certain people who know me would probably just assume that I have I had to file my taxes or something. I just put it off for so long that eventually they just came to arrest me, because that is something that I have such trouble with these things, and that's like the one thing I procrastinate on. That's the thing I find hardest to get myself not to procrastinate on. I hate this stuff so much, right?
The bureaucracy
stuff. Yeah. Honestly, it's so weird. Like, I noticed this. If I observe my response to this, it is my hatred of these things. It's really irrational, because it makes me feel like when this kind of thing is dumped on me, right? It's like, oh, you have to do this bureaucratic thing. I literally feel like, let's just end it all. Let's just burn down the world instead of me doing this, Let's just fuck civilization,
I'm imagining just the most basic thing. Okay, so there's a electricity bill for this month. Right, let's just burn the world.
Yeah.
It's bureaucratic bullshit I have to deal with.
It is a bit like that. And it's, and I realize it is totally irrational. It's like I have a phobia or something, But yeah, I don't know why that is. So that might be, some people are probably like, oh God, he's finally done it,
He's finally resisted this bureaucracy so hard.
Yeah. But I don't know. Yeah. What do you think people would think you did if you got arrested?
So if I got arrested, there's probably two things. They'd probably assume that I got myself in some, like, I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Like, I think of what my family would think. They'd just be like, wait, what? I know my dad would just be like, what? Ollie got arrested? Why the hell did Ollie get arrested? That's ridiculous. Or they would think that I'd lost my marbles. And
isn't that what you would think?
What? Like I would, in the moment?
It's like you're the one who's afraid of like losing your sanity. Do other people think, oh, Ollie's about to lose his sanity? I don't think so.
I'm probably projecting.
Yeah, I think you project.
Well, I don't know then. I don't know. Because the thing is, it's like, and I'm not terribly pleased to say this, but I've been, I don't know, pretty harmless when it comes to like law enforcement and stuff. I've not had some real issues with the police in the past.
Yeah.
We had, me and my brother, when we were like 12, we ordered a paintball gun to the house. And like off eBay, and the paintball gun barrel stuck out of the envelope, and then armed police like gathered. There was like vans of armed police up the street, and like boom, 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 armed police. I'm being serious. Yeah. I was at school, but my mum and my brother were at home. Shot themselves.
Paintball gun. All
but
right.
yeah, so yeah, I've not been in trouble much, but yeah, I'd like that to change one day. I think that.
Yeah. I feel like I've also not been in trouble much, but it just means I got away with everything.
Yeah.
That's how I frame it.
Fooled them all.
Yeah.
All right. that's the episode, Shane. We did it.
There we go.
Should we high five?
Let's awkwardly high five around the microphones. All right. Well, that's it. Let us know. So first of all, voice messages. You can go to anchor.fm/ikario. There's a button there you can press to leave a voice message if you have a question or something you want to send in that you want us to address. We always enjoy those. And you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. You can leave a review on Apple Podcasts, I think, right? You can give us a rating and stuff.
Yeah,
and you should do that.
Definitely a 5-star rating.
Yeah, for sure. And you can, I don't know, you can do other things. Go to ikario.com to see what else you can do.
Yeah, ikario.com is where you'll find everything else you need to know. So with that's us. Thank you very much, and see you next week.